In this video, I'm going to show you how to remove and replace a door. This is a basically simple task, consists of 3 steps. Firstly, we'll remove the old door, then we will measure and cut the door, and finally we'll hang the door. The tools we're going to use are a saw, a drill, we'll need some sanding pads, a smoothing plane so that we can smooth up the edge of the door once we've cut it, a tape measure, a G-clamp, a square, a ball peen hammer, a spade and Phillips head screwdriver, a chisel, an awl, some wedges, and of course you'll need your hinges and the door. We will need to do some cutting, so we'll need a dust mask, goggles and hearing protection. This is the old door we're going to remove. We've chosen to keep the old hinge. It's an old imperial hinge and they're different to the modern ones. However, we've still got to contend with many layers of paint. A normal way of going about this is to clean the screws out so that you can get an old-fashioned spade type screwdriver into the slot. So we'll do that. Okay, this is the last screw and the door's starting to fall away. So I need to support the door and I'll use some wedges just to take the weight of the door. Once we've removed the screws, we can shake the door to free the hinge and then move the door to a more convenient spot. They're quite heavy. Having removed the door, we can now remove any fittings that we don't want. In this case, we want to remove this latch. So we can use our power drill for this. It's relatively easy. Selecting reverse, we can back off the screws. What we have to contend with now is the frame strengthener, which goes under the latch plate. This also is relatively simple to remove. Now that we've removed the fittings, we can actually measure the door. Measure at the top to see what size we have. Take another measurement approximately in the middle of the door. I'll now take another measurement at the very base of the door. Having measured the width, we should now check the height. So we'll do that. At the same time, just to check, I'll take an ordinary set square and have a look, see how square the frame is. And you can see that the frame is not square. That's normal. That's what hanging doors is all about. You just find out what the existing situation is so that we can cope with it. Having measured the door frame, it's now time to lay out the measurements on the door itself. Firstly, however, we need to orient the door. In other words, which side do we want the lock on? Which side are the hinges going on? What's the top and what's the bottom? In this case, I've examined the door and I know I want to put my lock here, which means my hinges will go here. But I need to know if the door is opening inward to the right or inward to the left. We mark out our transferred measurements, the top measurement, our middle measurement, our bottom measurement. Having measured the width, we now need to check the height. And now we look at the discrepancy, the difference between what we measured and what the door is. If the difference is greater than 10 millimeter, we should really take 2 cuts. We should take 5 off this side and 5 off that to keep the door in balance. Of course, it's vital that we always take equal measure off of either side of the door because it's a hollow door and you'll simply cut into a void. When you trim the door, it's important that you check the manufacturer's instructions to find out how much you can trim off of either side of the door. I'm going to take a parallel cut and I've set my guide to my initial mark. And we need, as always, to protect our eyes. So we'll put on our eye protection and, of course, a mask and hearing plugs also. Once you've cut off your surplus, just check to see if you've got any high spots and simply take off any parts that are slightly high. Having cut the door, we now need to place it in the door frame and use wedges to hold it in place. We wedge it to make sure we have clearance all the way around, and particularly to lift the door to the correct height. We then mark off the position of the old hinges. We can now take it back down and set the hinge. We can now place the hinge with the barrel close in against the edge and with the sides of the hinge clearly on our mark. And we can mark round the hinge, the holes, and we can repeat the whole action down the other end of the door. On an external door, check with your manufacturer to see how many hinges they recommend. Heavy doors usually have 3 hinges. What I'm going to do now is to drill a hole through these marked positions. What I'm doing now is I'm supporting the side of the door so that when I chisel into the timber, I don't split the door frame or lift the veneer. I can now start to take it out so that the hinge will fit flush into it. When you're fitting a new glazed entry door, make sure the beading which holds the glass is on the outside. Okay, having let the hinge in, we've now stood the door back up against its frame and we're about to locate the hinge into its recess roughly. Simply hold it on one screw at this stage is good enough, and we can work on the bottom screw. Having finished off our hinges, all that remains to do now is to check the door fits snugly and neatly. That seems to be fine. However, you have to check as you close it to see if some adjustment is required. You may have to just take a little bit off the top or the bottom, and you have to make sure that the door can swing freely across the floor without catching it. Once the door is fitted, you've done the job. Wasn't that difficult, was it? And look at the result. However, should you want more information, contact your local Bunnings warehouse where you will get all the assistance you require.